In the dusty plains of the Arizona Territory, where the sun baked the earth like a relentless forge, lived a man named Elias Thorne. He was a shy farmer, barely 30 years old, with a frame as slender as the mesquite trees that dotted his modest homestead. Elias had come west from Ohio 5 years prior, chasing dreams of fertile land and solitude after losing his family to a cholera outbreak back east. He wasn't much for words or company. His days were spent tilling rocky soil for meager crops of corn and beans, tending to a few scrawny cattle, and avoiding the rough townsfolk in nearby Tombstone. His cabin was a simple affair, one room with a dirt floor, a leaky roof, and walls patched with whatever scraps he could find. At night, he read faded dime novels by lantern light, tales of heroic cowboys and fierce Indians that stirred his imagination but never his courage. Elias's shyness wasn't born of fear alone. It was a deep, seated quietude, a reluctance to impose himself on the world. He'd nod politely to travelers passing his fence, but conversations rarely stretched beyond the weather or the price of feed. Women, especially, made him stammer and blush. The few times he'd ventured into town for supplies, the saloon girls' teasing had sent him scurrying back to his farm like a frightened rabbit. He told himself he was content with his isolation, but in the still hours before dawn, a hollow ache gnawed at him, a longing for something more than the whisper of wind through the saguaros. One scorching afternoon, in the summer of 1882, Elias was out mending a broken irrigation ditch when he heard the thunder of hooves. He looked up to see a band of riders cresting the ridge, their silhouettes hazy in the heat shimmer. At first, he thought they were cowboys, but as they drew closer, he saw the feathers in their hair and the war paint on their faces. Apaches. His heart pounded. Raids weren't uncommon in these parts. Settlers whispered of Geronimo's warriors striking like lightning. Elias dropped his shovel and bolted for his cabin, grabbing his old Winchester rifle from the wall. He barricaded the door with a chair and peered through a crack in the shutters. The riders, 5 in all, circled his property, their ponies kicking up dust. They weren't attacking. Instead, they seemed to be searching for something. One dismounted, a tall figure wrapped in a blanket, and approached the cabin on foot. Elias's hands shook as he aimed the rifle. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I don't want trouble." The figure paused, then pulled back the blanket. It was a woman, an Apache woman, but unlike any Elias had ever seen. She stood well over 6 feet tall, her build powerful and broad-shouldered, like a mountain carved into human form. Her black hair cascaded in braids adorned with beads, and her eyes were dark pools that seemed to hold the secrets of the desert. She wore a deerskin dress fringed with quills, and a knife hung at her belt. Scars crisscrossed her arms, badges of battles fought. This was no ordinary girl. She was a giant among her people, a warrior known in whispers as Tall Willow, though Elias didn't know that yet. "We seek water for our horses," she called in broken English, her voice deep and resonant. "No harm to you." Elias hesitated. The other riders watched him passively, their rifles slung across their backs. Swallowing hard, he unbarred the door and stepped out, keeping his gun lowered but ready. "The well's over there," he said, pointing with a trembling finger. "Help yourselves, then be on your way." Tall Willow nodded and signaled to her companions. As they watered their animals, she studied Elias with curiosity. He was small compared to the men of her tribe, his face clean, shaven and boyish, his eyes darting away whenever they met hers. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yes," he mumbled, staring at his boots. "Just me." She tilted her head. "No woman, no family?" He flushed. "No, lost him back east." A shadow crossed her face, but she said nothing more. Once the horses were sated, the Apaches mounted up and rode off without another word, vanishing into the canyons like ghosts. Elias watched them go, his pulse still racing. That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't shake the image of the giant woman. There was a strength in her that both terrified and intrigued him. Days turned to weeks, and the encounter faded into memory. Elias returned to his routines, but the land grew harsher. A drought gripped the territory, turning his fields to dust. His cattle thinned, and coyotes grew bold, picking off the weak ones. One evening, as he drove his remaining herd back from a distant watering hole, he heard gunfire echoing through the hills. Bandits, he thought, outlaws preying on vulnerable settlers. He urged his horse faster, but it was too late. 3 masked men ambushed him, their revolvers gleaming in the twilight. "Hand over the cash, farmer boy," the leader snarled, a scar twisting his lip. Elias had little money, just a few coins in his pocket, but he fumbled them out. "That's all I got. Please leave me be." The outlaws laughed, one kicking over his saddlebags. "Pathetic. We'll take the cattle too." As they herded the animals away, Elias stood helpless, tears stinging his eyes. He trudged home on foot, defeated. Without his herd, winter would be brutal. He might have to abandon the farm altogether. The next morning, a shadow fell across his doorway. Tall Willow stood there, alone this time, a rifle slung over her shoulder and a pouch at her side. "You were robbed," she said flatly. Elias blinked in surprise. "How'd you know? We track them. They steal from our people too." She stepped inside without invitation, her head nearly brushing the ceiling. "I am Nijoni, means beautiful in my tongue, but they call me Tall Willow for my size." "Elias," he replied, backing up a step. "Why are you here?" "To help. Alone, you die in this land. Together, we get back what is yours." He stared at her, incredulous. "Me fight outlaws? I ain't no gunslinger." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then learn." What followed was a whirlwind that upended Elias's quiet life. Nijoni returned daily, teaching him the ways of the wild. She showed him how to track footprints in the sand, how to move silently through brush, how to handle a knife with precision. Her presence was commanding. She towered over him, her muscles honed from years of riding and fighting. Born to a band of Karakahua Apaches, she had grown unusually large due to some quirk of nature, earning respect and fear in equal measure. Her father had been a chief, killed in a skirmish with the U.S. cavalry, leaving her to fend for herself and her younger siblings. She had no husband. Apache men admired her strength but shied from her independence, and she refused to be tamed. Elias, in turn, shared his world. He taught her English phrases from his books, showed her how to mend fences and plant seeds. Their conversations were halting at first, his shyness clashing with her directness, but a bond formed. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, she gazed at the stars. "In my village, women weave baskets, care for children. I ride with warriors. No man wants a wife taller than him." Elias poked at the flames. "Ain't nothing wrong with being different. Back home, folks thought I was odd for reading instead of farming like my pa." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "It hurts being without a man. The nights are cold, the burden's heavy." He met her gaze for the first time without flinching. "I know that hurt. Been alone too long myself." Their quest to reclaim his cattle led them into danger. Nijoni's scouts located the outlaws' camp in a hidden arroyo, a den of thieves with stolen goods piled high. Under cover of night, they crept in. Elias's hands sweated on his rifle, but Nijoni's steady presence bolstered him. They freed the cattle quietly at first, but a guard spotted them. Gunfire erupted, bullets whizzing past like angry hornets. "Cover me," Nijoni shouted, charging forward with her knife drawn. Elias fired, his shots wild but enough to pin down 2 bandits. Nijoni felled the leader with a swift tackle, her giant frame overpowering him. The others fled, leaving the camp in chaos. As dawn broke, they drove the herd back, triumphant. Elias whooped, a sound foreign to his own ears. "We did it," Nijoni grinned, clapping his shoulder. "You fought like a warrior." But victory was short-lived. Word of the raid spread, and the outlaws' boss, a notorious gunslinger named Black Jack Harlan, vowed revenge. Harlan was a mean cuss, wanted in 3 territories for murder and rustling. He gathered a posse and descended on Elias's farm, torching the barn and scattering the cattle once more. Elias and Nijoni barely escaped, fleeing into the canyons where her people hid. In the Apache camp, nestled among red rock cliffs, Elias was an outsider. Warriors eyed him suspiciously, children pointed at the pale farmer. Nijoni's mother, an elder with weathered skin, welcomed him warily. "You bring trouble," she said. "He brings heart," Nijoni replied. They planned a counterattack. Nijoni rallied her kin, while Elias used his knowledge of settler trails to map Harlan's movements. As they prepared, their connection deepened. One moonlit night, away from the camp, Nijoni confessed her fears. "I am strong, but inside, I ache for companionship, to share stories, to hold someone in the dark." Elias took her hand, large and calloused in his. "I was shy cause I feared rejection, but with you, I feel brave." Their lips met, a tentative kiss that ignited like dry tinder. For the first time, Elias shed his timidity, and Nijoni found vulnerability in her strength. The showdown came at Devil's Pass, a narrow gorge where Harlan's gang ambushed travelers. Nijoni and Elias led a mixed force, Apaches and a few sympathetic settlers Elias had convinced to join. The battle was fierce. Arrows whistled alongside bullets, horses reared, men fell. Harlan, spotting Elias, charged with a roar. "You think you can play hero, farmer?" Elias stood his ground, firing steadily. A bullet grazed his arm, but he didn't falter. Nijoni leaped from a ledge, tackling Harlan from his horse. They wrestled in the dust, her size giving her the edge. With a final thrust, she disarmed him, pressing her knife to his throat. Yield or die. Harlan surrendered, his gang broken. The territory breathed easier, and Elias's farm was safe. In the aftermath, Elias rebuilt, with Nijoni by his side. They married in a blend of traditions, a settler ceremony with Apache blessings. She towered over him at the altar, but he stood tall in spirit. Their life wasn't easy. Prejudices lingered, and the West remained wild. But together they faced it. Years passed. Their children grew strong, inheriting her height and his quiet wisdom. Elias became a respected rancher, Nijoni a bridge between worlds. And whenever the ache of loneliness threatened, they remembered her words. "It hurts being without a man." But now, it was a hurt healed. The sun set on their homestead, painting the sky in hues of fire. Elias and Nijoni sat on the porch, hands entwined, "Worth every risk," he said. She smiled. "Yes, together we are whole."